This is the conflict between Azerbaijan and Armenia, centered on the mountainous region of Nagorno-Karabakh, known as Artsakh to Armenians. The conflict is primarily ethnic and territorial, with significant international dimensions. For decades, it was considered a frozen conflict, but it erupted into a full-scale war in 2020. After Azerbaijan's military actions in 2023, the Republic of Artsakh ceased to exist. Recently, a significant step toward a lasting peace was taken, with the signing of a peace agreement between the two countries in Washington. While this agreement addresses many key issues, deep mistrust and unresolved issues remain. The history of this land is not just a backdrop, it is a central part of the dispute. At its core, this is a conflict between two states and two nations. On one side are the Armenians, a people whose roots in the region stretch back millennia. Their identity is forged in a land of mountains and stone, defined by two pillars, their unique language and their ancient Christian faith. The first unified Armenian kingdom under the Artaxiad dynasty emerged around 190 BC, with the kingdom rising to become one of the most powerful states east of Rome under Tigranes the Great. In 301 AD, Armenia became the first nation in history to adopt Christianity as its state religion. The Armenian Apostolic Church rejected the Council of Chalcedon in 451 AD and developed a Miaphysite Christology, aligning it with Oriental Orthodoxy, alongside churches like the Coptic, Ethiopian, Syriac, and Indian Orthodox churches. This act bound their identity not just to a territory, but to a church that would endure centuries of empires, invasions, and persecution. Their language, Indo-European but distinct from any other branch, remains a vital link to their past. It is the language of their prayers, their poetry, and their shared history. On the other side of the conflict are the Azerbaijanis, a people with a distinct and rich heritage. Their cultural and linguistic roots are shaped by the Oghuz Turks, who migrated into the South Caucasus in the medieval period, blending with local peoples and reshaping the region's identity. Throughout the Middle Ages, the most significant state on this territory was the Shirvanshahs, one of the longest-lasting dynasties in the Islamic world, which maintained a high degree of autonomy for centuries. Their identity is anchored in their Turkic language and the Shia branch of Islam. They trace their political history to powerful empires, most notably the Safavid Empire, which established Shia Islam as the state religion and left a profound and lasting impact on their culture, art, and national consciousness. Their modern language, a Turkic language closely related to Turkish, serves as a powerful link to a broader Turkic world, distinguishing them from their Armenian neighbours. While the European powers clashed in World War I, the Caucasus became a crucial but often neglected battlefield. Here, centuries-old rivals, the Russian and Ottoman empires, collided. The Russian Imperial Army, encouraged by local Armenian volunteers, advanced deep into Ottoman territory, creating instability and paralysing Ottoman communications. In this chaos, the Ottoman government came to see the Armenians as an internal enemy. Beginning in 1915, they carried out a campaign of systematic deportation, massacre, and forced death marches, in which hundreds of thousands of Armenians perished at the hands of Ottoman soldiers and paramilitary forces. This event remains one of the most horrific crimes against humanity of the 20th century. The collapse of the Russian front in 1917, due to the February and October revolutions, created a huge political vacuum. The Imperial Army withdrew, leaving the Caucasus in complete disarray. The short-lived Transcaucasian Democratic Federative Republic, a union of Armenians, Azerbaijanis and Georgians, soon disintegrated under the pressure of the Ottoman advance. In this state of lawlessness, but also driven by deeply rooted national aspirations, the only path forward was the creation of new independent states. On the ruins of empires, on May 28, 1918, the First Republic of Armenia and the Azerbaijan Democratic Republic were proclaimed. Although both were short-lived, these moments of independence became the foundation of their modern national identities. The period from 1918 to 1920 was anything but peaceful for the young republics of Armenia and Azerbaijan. Born from the ashes of collapsed empires, they found themselves in a whirlwind of internal turmoil and border struggles. After the dissolution of the Transcaucasian Democratic Federative Republic, the new independent republics of Armenia, Azerbaijan and Georgia signed the Treaty of Batumi with the Ottoman Empire in June 1918, which formally established their initial, albeit constrained, borders. In December 1918, a brief conflict broke out with neighbouring Georgia over the territories of Lori and Akhalkalaki, which were predominantly inhabited by Armenians. British intervention established a ceasefire, and the disputed area became a neutral zone, but relations remained tense. The most intense conflicts, however, took place between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Due to border disputes and ethnic tensions, armed clashes erupted in regions with mixed populations, especially in Nagorno-Karabakh and Nakhchivan. It was in this period that the first armed conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan began in these regions, a conflict that would become the cornerstone of their long-standing dispute. Periodic massacres and ethnic cleansing occurred on both sides, further worsening relations. In Armenia itself, during 1919 and 1920, there were also Muslim uprisings, which historians widely interpret as being incited by Turkish and Azerbaijani agents with the aim of destabilizing the country and creating a pan-Turkic corridor. In this chaos, a glimmer of hope appeared for Armenia. In January 1920, the Allied Supreme Council, de facto, recognized the independence of Azerbaijan, Armenia and Georgia, though this recognition was short-lived due to the Bolshevik advance in the Caucasus later that year. The Treaty of Sèvres, signed in August 1920, officially recognized the independence of Armenia and granted it significantly expanded borders, at the expense of the Ottoman Empire, with US President Woodrow Wilson even drawing a map of Wilsonian Armenia. However, Azerbaijan and Georgia were not directly addressed in this treaty. Although the Treaty of Sèvres was internationally recognized, it proved to be a dead letter. Turkish nationalists under the leadership of Mustafa Kemal Atatürk rejected it and launched a war against Armenia, leading to the defeat of the Armenian army and the loss of territory. This chaos created the perfect opportunity for Bolshevik Russia to reassert control over the Caucasus. The newly established republics of Armenia and Azerbaijan were short-lived. Burdened by internal conflicts and weakened by interstate wars over territorial disputes, they lacked the strength to resist a new, powerful force emerging nearby, Bolshevik Russia. The Bolsheviks saw the Caucasus as a crucial strategic point, and the oil in Baku was of paramount importance to their plans. This Bolshevik presence existed even at the time of the ADR's proclamation. The Azerbaijan Democratic Republic was established in Tbilisi in May 1918 because Baku was already under the control of a Bolshevik-led government. The Bolshevik advance in the Caucasus brought an end to Azerbaijan's brief period of independence. The Red Army, specifically its 11th Army, invaded Azerbaijan, taking advantage of internal instability and with the support of local Azerbaijani Bolsheviks. Within days, on April 28, 1920, the Azerbaijan Democratic Republic fell, and in its place, the Azerbaijan Soviet Socialist Republic was established. This marked the end of a short period of independence and the beginning of the Soviet era for the nation. In the wake of Azerbaijan's Sovietization, the Bolshevik advance in the Caucasus continued. The First Republic of Armenia, like its Azerbaijani counterpart, was a new and fragile state, embroiled in its own conflicts. It was simultaneously fighting a war with Kemalist Turkey and grappling with internal political instability. The chaos in the region created the perfect opportunity for Bolshevik Russia to reassert control. In late 1920, the Red Army began its invasion. This military campaign, much like the one in Azerbaijan, was aimed at overthrowing the existing government and establishing a new Soviet one. Weakened by the war with Turkey and a lack of support from European powers, Armenia's government was unable to mount an effective defense. By December 1920, the Red Army had taken control, leading to the dissolution of the First Republic of Armenia and the establishment of the Armenian Soviet Socialist Republic. The invasion effectively brought an end to the Armenian-Azerbaijani conflict of 1918 to 1920, as both nations were now under Soviet control. The borders of the new republics were subsequently redrawn by the Soviets, setting the stage for future disputes over territories like Nagorno-Karabakh. The Soviet takeover in the early 1920s ended open warfare between Armenia and Azerbaijan, but left the Nagorno-Karabakh issue unresolved. In July 1923, the Soviet authorities established the Nagorno-Karabakh Autonomous Oblast, NKAO, within the Azerbaijan SSR, with an ethnic Armenian majority. While Armenians in the oblast maintained cultural institutions, many complained over decades of economic neglect and political underrepresentation, a claim disputed by Azerbaijani sources. Periodic appeals to transfer the NKAO to Armenia, notably in 1945 and the 1960s, were consistently rejected by Moscow. This uneasy calm unravelled in 1988 when Mikhail Gorbachev's reforms of glasnost and perestroika allowed long-suppressed grievances to surface. In February, the Karabakh movement emerged, with mass demonstrations in Stepanakert and Yerevan demanding the oblast's unification with Armenia. Azerbaijan firmly rejected the idea, and tensions escalated. Later that month, the Sumgait pogrom, in which Armenian residents of the Azerbaijani city were attacked by mobs, marked a point of no return, prompting a mass exodus of Armenians from Azerbaijan and, in parallel, Azerbaijanis from Armenia. As the Soviet Union neared collapse in late 1991, Nagorno-Karabakh's local authorities held a referendum on 10th of December, boycotted by the Azerbaijani population, in which the vast majority of Armenian voters supported independence. Azerbaijan refused to recognise the result, and the dispute quickly erupted into full-scale war. The long-frozen conflict had thawed. The dissolution of the Soviet Union removed the last restraints on the conflict, transforming what had been an internal dispute within the USSR into an international war with regional powers taking sides. In early 1992, sporadic clashes escalated into all-out war between Armenian forces, including local Karabakh units and support from Armenia, and the Azerbaijani military. The fighting was fierce and chaotic, marked by the capture and loss of key towns, heavy artillery exchanges, and widespread destruction. This new phase saw significant outside involvement. Regional powers like Russia and Turkey supported their respective allies, with Turkey providing political and military backing to Azerbaijan, while Russia maintained a complex role, often supplying both sides but largely favouring Armenia. Crucially, Armenia also received significant support from its large and globally influential diaspora, which provided financial aid and political advocacy. Civilian suffering was immense. Mass displacement affected both communities, while atrocities, most notably the February 1992 killings in Khojaly, deepened animosities. By 1993, Armenian forces controlled Nagorno-Karabakh and several surrounding Azerbaijani districts, creating a land corridor to Armenia. A Russian-brokered ceasefire, signed in Bishkek in May 1994, froze the front lines. Nagorno-Karabakh remained under Armenian control, but unrecognized internationally, setting the stage for decades of fragile stalemate. The fragile 1994 ceasefire, while ending the all-out war, initiated a long period of what became known as a frozen conflict. A direct consequence of the war's end was the massive ethnic displacement. Hundreds of thousands of Azerbaijanis were expelled from Nagorno-Karabakh and the surrounding territories occupied by Armenian forces, while nearly all Armenians fled Azerbaijan. This created two deeply traumatized and embittered societies. The self-proclaimed Nagorno-Karabakh Republic of Artsakh, was established, a de facto state that operated with its own government, army, and institutions. This entity, however, remained unrecognized by the international community. For decades, the political landscape of the region was defined by this stalemate. In Armenia, the leadership of Nagorno-Karabakh often held significant sway in national politics, with many former leaders from the region ascending to the highest offices in Yerevan. Russia maintained a complex influence, acting as a key military ally to Armenia and a co-chair of the OSCE Minsk Group, all while remaining a major arms supplier to both sides. Over time, this dynamic began to shift. Armenia experienced a democratic transition in 2018, which led to a government less aligned with the traditional Russian sphere of influence and more open to a Western orientation. This change in Armenia's political trajectory coincided with Azerbaijan's growing militarization, fueled by its immense oil wealth. With the unwavering political and military support of Turkey, Azerbaijan acquired advanced weaponry, decisively shifting the balance of power. The fragile peace was not a stalemate, but a long, slow-burning fuse that was now ready to ignite. The long-frozen conflict finally thawed in September 2020, as Azerbaijan, backed by Turkey, launched a large-scale offensive. The war was defined by modern military technology, with Azerbaijan's use of Turkish-made Bayraktar drones proving devastatingly effective against Armenia's older Soviet-era military equipment. The conflict was no longer a static war of trenches, but a fast-moving high-tech war with significant territorial gains for Azerbaijan. The fighting was fierce and chaotic, leading to a large number of casualties on both sides and a humanitarian crisis. The war ended after 44 days with a Russian-brokered ceasefire agreement signed in November 2020. The terms were a major victory for Azerbaijan. Armenia was forced to surrender the 7 districts surrounding Nagorno-Karabakh that it had occupied since the 1990s, as well as a significant portion of Nagorno-Karabakh itself, including the culturally and strategically important city of Shusha. Azerbaijan reclaimed approximately 60 to 65% of the total territory previously held by the self-proclaimed Republic of Artsakh. The agreement also established a new geopolitical reality, with the deployment of Russian peacekeepers to patrol the remaining core territory of Nagorno-Karabakh and the Zangezur Corridor, the only road connecting it to Armenia. While a ceasefire was in place, the core issue remained unresolved, with Nagorno-Karabakh isolated and its future hanging in the balance, setting the stage for the final act of the conflict. The long-term fragility of the 2020 ceasefire became painfully clear as Azerbaijan began to assert its dominance. The key to this was a gradual but effective blockade of the Zangezur Corridor, the only road connecting Nagorno-Karabakh to Armenia, which led to a severe humanitarian crisis. In September 2023, Azerbaijan launched a swift, decisive military offensive. The local Karabakh Armenian defense forces were quickly overwhelmed, and within days they surrendered. This led to the official dissolution of the self-proclaimed Republic of Artsakh by the end of 2023. This victory for Azerbaijan was followed by the mass exodus of the entire ethnic Armenian population from the region, bringing to a close over a millennium of their presence in Nagorno-Karabakh. After the 2020 war and the subsequent withdrawal of Armenian forces from Nagorno-Karabakh, Azerbaijan has also gained control over a number of disputed territories along the internationally recognized border between Armenia and Azerbaijan. In this new reality, Armenia expressed fears that Azerbaijan would use its military advantage to establish a so-called Zangezur Corridor through Armenia's southern Syunik province to connect its mainland with its Nakhichevan exclave. However, the international landscape has shifted. A new peace agreement, sometimes referred to as the Washington Treaty, was signed in August 2025 at the White House. This deal aims to officially end the decades-long conflict. While it provides for a transit corridor, the agreement specifies that it will be a US-managed route under Armenian law, addressing Armenian concerns about a loss of sovereignty. The agreement also includes a joint request to dissolve the OSCE-Minsk group, marking a major shift away from Russian-led mediation. While a chapter of the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict has closed, the new political realities, the fate of the displaced Armenian population, and the ongoing diplomatic challenges will shape the region for generations to come.